G'day, I'm Mr. Fedora Mustache and this is my board game Laboratory Lockdown. Art not final. But first, a quick message. I release a daily puzzle called Find the Fedora. One fedora hidden in every photo. Available at mrfedoramustache.com or on Facebook. For this demonstration, I will show you a 4-player game. We'll start by removing 4 of the characters. Then we'll remove the excess loot tokens. Now this is a 4-player game, so we'll start by shuffling the Infected or Not deck. Hold left click over the deck and then give it a wiggle. One, 2, 3, 4. Delete the rest of the deck. Now because this is a 4-player game, delete the second infected card. Grab the first infected card, press F to flip it, and add it to the pile. Now there are 4 players, but 5 infected or not cards. Give it another shuffle. Draw one and place it on the infected or not floor card space. You can use your mouse wheel to rotate. Give the rest to each player. For a 7 or 8 player game, grab one infected card, press F to flip, and add it to the deck. Hold left click over the deck and give it a shuffle. Now draw 7 or 8 cards depending on how many players you have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Delete the rest of the deck, then add the other infected card. F to flip, add to the deck. You now have 9 cards for an 8-player game, with potentially 2 infected. Hover over the objectives deck and hold left click down to pick them all up. Give this a bit of a jiggle to shuffle it. Now grab 4 objectives and give 1 to each player. Hold left click over the rest of the pile and delete. Delete this red bag too, that's kind of a mistake. Give each player their matching loot tokens. Give the first player their dice and the purge player token. Make sure each lab token is set to locked, because as you can see on the other side, it's lockdown lifted. Place the exit token over here. Make sure it is set to locked, because as you can see, it's... Place the orange purge token on the red lab. Give each item deck a shuffle, holding left click and giving a wiggle. This is what the game should look like once you have set up, at least for a 4-player game. On a player's turn, they are given 1 action and 1 dice roll of movement. When a player moves, they move via the yellow squares, so if a player was to go from this space to the top space, that would be 1, 2, 3. The black lines are solid walls that cannot be passed through. So this player would move like this. A player cannot access a laboratory by themselves, but they can end their turn on a space with one of these buttons, allowing access for other players to enter the lab. In this instance, black is holding the door open for anyone who wishes to enter Green Lab. but black cannot open the door for themselves. Now if purple ends his turn in the green lab, he is now holding both doors open, allowing players to come and go as they please. Now in this instance, if there are no other players holding the button for the purple to escape, they are now stuck in the green lab. Each button only controls a single door, so if purple is to end their turn here, they are only opening the left side of the green lab unlocked. So if black were to come down, the top door would still be locked, unless they end their turn there, thus unlocking it for other players. Each player has a secret objective to complete before escaping the board. These can range from a variety of things, such as having specific item cards in your hand at the end of the game, to helping other players complete their objectives. Some even involve having to kill other players. Most objective cards have multiple objectives to complete. Most commonly, it's to not let the parasite escape and complete your objective. Both must be completed for you to be a winner. Of course, if you die, you lose. Each player has their own infected or not card, and there is also one on the infected or not floor card space. A player may look at their own infected or not card, but not show other players. Players can never look at the infected or not floor card, even with items. There are a few different infected or not cards. Not infected is probably the most simple. You're not infected. Nothing happens, you're just bog standard. A false reading card is a little different. If you have a false reading card, that means you can trip up a scanner. If a player has a false reading card and goes through that scanner on their turn, or starts their turn on that scanner, or finishes their turn on that scanner, they grab a purple alert token. They place that purple alert token in front of them for all to see. Of course, players can avoid going through the scanner by going the long way around. Some infected or not cards have false readings of one color, all the way up to all colors. If a player with a false reading card of a different color goes through a scanner, nothing happens. Only if you have the specific color and go through that specific scanner. If a player with an infected card goes through any scanner, they instantly grab an alert token. When a player picks up an alert token, they do not reveal their infected or not card. They simply pick up the token and say whatever they want to say. If players believe them, they believe them. If they don't, they don't. When a player ends their turn on the space with another player, they must shuffle their infected or not cards. In this instance, let's say blue is player number 1 and green is player number 4. Blue has just landed on green and ended their turn. So now, blue places their infected or not card down, green places it on top, and players add the infected or not floor card as well. These cards are then shuffled and randomly given back to each player. And the infected or not floor card is placed back. Now each player might have a completely different infected or not card, or they might have their old one back. Players are allowed to look at their new or old infected or not card, but not show other players. Players can pass by another player without infecting them as long as they do not stop on the same spot. In this instance, if green were to land in the lab and finish their turn, green, purple, and the floor infected or not card would shuffle. Now on the next turn, if blue were to enter the lab as well, blue, purple, green, and the infected or floor card would shuffle again immediately. If a player has a purple alert token and does an action that would require them to grab an alert token, they do not. Players can only have one alert token at a time. Players hold on to their purple alert tokens until the next time they shuffle their infected or not cards. When this is done, players then grab a new infected or not card, One goes back to the floor space, and the player would return their alert token back to the bag. When a player is in a lab or moves to a lab, they can spend an action point to draw an item from the deck. Each lab has its own deck of items next to it. When a player grabs an item card from that lab, they grab the top card and add it to their hand. Item cards do a variety of different things, from protection to weapons, but most importantly, key cards. Key cards are the most important part of the game. Using key cards, players can unlock each lab in order to be able to unlock the exit. In this instance, if the green player had the green key card in their inventory and hadn't spent their action point this turn, they would reveal their green key card to all players. They would be in the green lab. Then they would flip the green lab lockdown token. This now means players are 25% of the way to unlocking the exit. The green player would then return the green key card to their hand. Once a token has been unlocked, it cannot be relocked. Also, if you're having trouble reading a card in Tabletop Simulator, hover over it, don't grab it, hover over it and press Alt. It will zoom in on the card so you'll be able to read it easier. When a player is in the green lab and they draw an item card, they do not draw it from the yellow deck, the blue deck, or the red deck. When the last of a deck has been drawn, no more cards can be drawn from that lab. Players will have to go to the other labs to search those decks. When a player in the green lab has used the green key card and unlocked it, and a player that owns the blue key card in the blue lab has unlocked it, and the red lab with the red key card, and in the yellow lab with the yellow key card, and all the labs are unlocked, players only need to unlock the exit. To do this, all 4 labs must be unlocked. One player must land on the 2-player lockdown lifter. Then another player must move to the same space. Naturally, these 2 players will have to shuffle their infected or not cards with the floor inflected or not card. Then one of the 2 players will have to spend an action point to unlock the exit. Once the exit is unlocked, players can leave whenever they want. They simply have to move off the board. Say purple player has rolled a 3. 1, 2. Purple is now finished. Green rolls a 5. 1, 2, 3. Green is now off the board. Once all players are dead or off the board, the game is over. At the start of each round, a laboratory is purged. This basically means set on fire, which is represented by this big orange marble. It starts in the red lab. After each player has had a turn, and it returns to the first player, who is the purge player, the player who has the purge token. At the start of that player's turn, they move the purge to the next lab. Then, after each player has again had another turn, and it's returned to the purge player token, the purge moves again. The purge moves in a clockwise motion. So each round after it returns to the purge player, at the start of that player's turn, they move the purge to the next lab. Any player in a lab that is purged is killed. There are 2 exceptions to this rule. A player with the fireproof suit can reveal this from their hand to all other players to show that they cannot die in the purge. They then return this to their hand. A player with the fireproof suit can enter into a lab that is currently being purged, as long as they reveal they have the fireproof suit to all other players, and then return it to their hand. The other exception is the vital signs detector. If a player is killed for whatever reason, they can reveal this card, place their character at the medbay space, and then discard the vital signs detector. These two little brown boxes are considered terminal spaces. There are two on the board, the exit space being one of them, and the space above it being another. These are the only two spaces that if a player reveals that they have a key card, they can change where the purge is. A player with a key card in their hand can reveal the card and spend their action point for their turn to change the purge. If the green player had the green key card in their hand, they could reveal it while standing on this space, spend their action point for their turn, and move the purge immediately to the green lab. If a player had the red key card and was standing on a terminal space, they could move the purge to a red lab. When a player moves the purge, they take the purge token and become the purge player. So at the start of their next turn is when they start moving the purge. One objective requires you to become the purge player and exit the game at that time. If another player becomes the purge player after you have exited, you still win. Some weapons allow you to kill another player. In this instance, let's pretend green has a 9mm gun. To use this weapon, green must also have a bullet in their hand. But it must be a 9mm bullet for the 9mm gun. If it's something like the revolver bullet, it cannot be used with the 9mm. If green had a 9mm gun and a 9mm bullet in their inventory, they could shoot via line of sight. Line of sight requires a player to see directly left and right, or up and down of a player. However, you must take into account walls. In this instance, green cannot see black. Green can see purple. Purple is on a space in front of green. Green cannot see blue. Green would have to be here to see blue. But here, green could still not see black due to the wall. If black were over here, green would have the option of shooting purple or black, but not blue. In this instance, green could not shoot black due to the wall. They could not shoot blue, even though they're diagonal. They need to be left and right, up and down. But green could shoot purple. To perform this action, green would reveal the gun, the bullet. They would then pick their target and declare it, "I'm shooting purple." They would then discard their bullet, return the pistol to their inventory. Then if purple had any kind of defense, like a bulletproof vest or a vital signs detector, they would then declare it after green has thrown away their bullet. When a player is killed, be it via a weapon from another player they can't defend against, or from the purge, that player is dead and out of the game. When a player dies, they do not reveal their infected or not card. That player leaves their character as a grave mark. They place their loot token on that space. They then place any items they had in their hand in front of them, and then place the second loot token on top of it. Any player can now come along and spend an action point to claim all the loot of the dead player. Unlike grabbing a single item card from the lab per action point, grabbing loot means the players get every single one of the dead player's items. When a player is dead and another player lands on that same space, it's the same as landing on another player's space. The living player, the dead player, and the floor would shuffle their infected or not cards and then redistribute them. On a player's turn, they get a dice roll of movement and one action. The action could be a variety of things. It could be using an item card that requires an action. It could be the two-player lockdown lifter at the end of the game. It can be to trade items with another willing player. The player whose turn it is picks a player who's adjacent or on the same space as them. Blue player could trade with purple or green, but not black. Adjacent needs to be up or down, left or right. The two players trading would show each other which cards they're willing to trade. The two players can trade as many cards backwards and forwards as they want. Another action is to steal from a player. A player may steal from a player on the same space or an adjacent space. To steal from a player, the player whose turn it is would declare that they're stealing from and specify who. They then pick a random item card from that player. And the last action is to draw a card from a lab. On a player's turn, they can move and do an action in whatever order they want. But if a player stops to perform an action, they must do a shuffle if another player is on that space. For example, say blue rolled a 5. Blue moves 1, 2, and stops on the purple space to perform an action. Blue and purple and the floor space would shuffle their infected or not cards. Blue then pulls out their item card from their hand, which is the knife, and spends their action point stabbing a player on the same space or an adjacent space. In this instance, green. Blue stabs green with their action point. Spend an action too. Blue can then continue on. 3, 4, 5. The last space on the board to be discussed is the teleporter square. Players can find an item called a teleporter remote. It allows a player to spend an action on their turn and teleport from anywhere on the board to this square, including if you're stuck in a lab.